The cargo hauler's engines hummed as Marcus Chin guided his ship into docking bay 7 of Station Zeta 9. His hands were steady on the controls, though his heart raced with excitement. First solo run, first real payment. At 19, he was finally proving he could handle merchant work without his uncle hovering over every decision. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk. Marcus stretched in his pilot seat and grinned at the small AI display flickering to life beside him. "Jessa, we made it!" "Right on schedule." "Congratulations, Marcus. However, I must inform you that station security has issued a Level 3 alert. All personnel are advised to remain in designated safe zones." Marcus frowned as he pulled on his jacket. "What's going on?" "Pirates." "Negative. A Draconid vessel docked 2 hours ago. Station Commander Thrix has implemented standard precautionary measures." The word Draconid made Marcus pause. He'd heard stories about them during his childhood on the terraforming colonies. Massive reptilian creatures, stronger than most species, temperamental and violent. Every spacer knew to give them wide clearance, but Marcus had never actually seen one. "Well, I'm just dropping off medical supplies and picking up payment. Should be simple enough." He stepped out onto the station's main concourse and immediately felt the tension in the air. The normally bustling trading hub was nearly empty. A few Centaurian merchants hurried past with their heads down. 2 Vexillian traders stood behind reinforced stalls, their multiple eyes darting nervously toward the eastern corridor. Marcus followed their gaze and saw station security officers positioned at regular intervals, their weapons clearly visible. Whatever was happening, people were genuinely scared. He made his way to the cargo office, delivered his shipment manifest, and collected his credit chip. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. The Centaurian clerk barely looked at him, clearly wanting everyone to finish their business and leave quickly. Marcus was heading back toward his ship when he heard it, a sound that was part whimper, part chirp. It came from a narrow service corridor to his right, away from the main thoroughfare. His instincts from growing up around animals kicked in. That was a distress sound, something young and scared. "Marcus, your ship is in the opposite direction." Jessa's voice chimed through his wrist comm. "I know, just checking something." He moved quietly into the corridor, following the sound. The lighting was dimmer here, casting long shadows. And there, huddled behind a stack of shipping containers, was a creature that made Marcus stop breathing for a moment. It was roughly the size of a large dog, covered in dark blue scales that shimmered like polished stone. Small wings were folded against its back. Its snout was elegant and reptilian, with wisps of steam curling from its nostrils. Golden eyes, slit-pupiled and intelligent, stared at him with clear distress. A baby Draconid. It had to be. "Marcus, I am detecting elevated biosigns consistent with a juvenile Draconid. You should alert security immediately and vacate the area." But Marcus wasn't moving. The creature reminded him of a nervous coltsback on the terraforming station. Lost, scared, probably separated from its parent. Its tail was tucked close to its body. Its ears were flat against its head. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down to make himself smaller. "You lost, buddy." The creature's head tilted. It made that chirping sound again. Behind him, Marcus heard rapid footsteps and panicked voices. "By the stars, get away from it. Are you insane?" 2 Vexillian traders stood at the corridor entrance, their faces expressing pure horror. One was frantically tapping at a communicator, but Marcus kept his attention on the small dragon. He'd learned long ago that sudden movements scared animals more than anything else. He slowly extended his hand, palm down, letting the creature catch his scent. "It's okay. Nobody's going to hurt you." The baby Draconid sniffed cautiously. Then, to Marcus's delight, it stepped forward and pressed its snout against his palm. The scales were warm, almost hot to the touch. Steam puffed from its nostrils, but the sound it made was almost like purring. Marcus smiled and gently scratched under its chin. The creature leaned into the touch, its eyes half closing in contentment. "There you go. Not so scary, are you?" A massive shadow fell over them both. Marcus looked up slowly. Standing at the corridor entrance was the largest being he'd ever seen. nearly 3 meters tall, covered in obsidian black scales, with wings folded against a powerful frame. Golden eyes identical to the baby's stared down at him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. The draconic adult opened its mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and released a sound that shook the walls. The baby chirped happily and bounded toward the massive creature. Marcus stood slowly, heart hammering. He raised his hands in what he hoped was a peaceful gesture. The draconid's eyes moved from its youngling to Marcus, then back again. The expression shifted to something that might have been confusion. Captain Velshera stared at the human, in complete disbelief. Her daughter Ember was pressed against the small creature's legs, making contented rumbling sound she only made when feeling completely safe. This made no sense. No sense at all. For 3 cycles, Velshera had traveled to the galaxy conducting trade. And for 3 cycles, every species they encountered had reacted the same way. Fear, distance, barely concealed hostility. Even basic transactions required layers of security protocols and armed escorts. Her people were treated like dangerous animals that might attack at any moment, and the younglings had it worse. Other species saw draconid children as unpredictable threats. Ember couldn't even leave the ship without causing panic. The isolation was breaking Velshera's heart. Her daughter needed socialization. She needed to learn that not everyone was an enemy. But how could she learn that when everyone ran away screaming? Yet here stood this human. This impossibly small, fragile-looking human with no claws, no natural armor, and no visible weapons. And he wasn't running. He wasn't even showing the typical signs of fear that Velshera had learned to recognize across dozens of species. "I apologize," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I heard her crying and thought she was lost. I didn't mean to interfere." Velshera's translator implant processed the words, but she found herself even more confused. Was this some kind of trick? She performed the traditional greeting gesture, raising her head and spreading her wings slightly while releasing a measured roar. This was basic politeness among her people, like a bow or handshake. The human didn't flee. He simply nodded and said, "Hello to you too." Behind her, Velshera heard her security officer Tar approaching rapidly. "Captain, step away from it." Humans are unpredictable. Their reputation suggests they might attack without reason. Velshera held up one clawed hand, signaling Tar to wait. She looked at Marcus more carefully. His body language was completely wrong for a prey species. Prey creatures made themselves smaller, avoided eye contact, showed submission. But this human stood straight, met her gaze directly, yet without the aggressive challenge posture that predator species used. He was treating her like an equal, like a person. "Your youngling is beautiful," Marcus continued, still speaking in that calm tone. "What's her name?" No one had ever asked about Ember before, not in 3 cycles of travel. Other species barely acknowledged her existence, except to demand she be kept locked up. "Ember," Velshera said carefully, testing the strange interaction. "She is called Ember. That's a perfect name. She's got those warm colors in her scales, like glowing coals." Marcus crouched down again, and Ember immediately chirped happily, rubbing her head against his shoulder. "I grew up around animals on a terraforming colony. Horses, cattle, even some of Earth's predators we were reintroducing. Your daughter has the same energy as the young ones. Curious and playful." Velshera felt something shift in her chest. He saw Ember as a child, not a monster, not a threat. A child. "You are not afraid?" she said, and it came out almost like a question. Marcus looked up at her and smiled. It was a strange expression, showing teeth, but the translator implant indicated friendly intent. "Should I be? She's just a kid who got separated from her mom, and you're just a parent who was probably scared out of your mind when you couldn't find her." The accuracy of that statement shocked Velshera. When she discovered Ember missing from their ship, pure terror had flooded through her. Not just fear for her daughter's safety, but fear of what might happen. What if station security decided Ember was a threat? What if they hurt her? These thoughts had driven Velshera to rush through the station, breaking every protocol. "Walk with me," Velshera said suddenly. "Please, back to my ship." I would speak with you more. She expected refusal, expected excuses. But Marcus simply nodded. Sure, lead the way. As they walked through the station corridors, Velshera noticed the stairs. Other species pressed themselves against walls, creating maximum distance. A Centaurian merchant actually fled into a storage room, but the human walked beside her without hesitation, occasionally laughing as Ember pranced around his feet. Tar followed at a distance, clearly disturbed by the entire situation. When they reached the Draconid ship, Velshera's crew reacted with alarm. Her first officer, Raxdor, moved to block the entrance. Captain, you cannot bring an alien aboard. The risk is mine to take, Velshera interrupted. This human showed kindness to my daughter when he had no reason to do so. I will offer him hospitality. Inside the ship, Marcus looked around with obvious interest. The interior was designed for beings much larger than him, but he didn't seem intimidated. When Velshera offered him a seat in her private quarters, he accepted. I have a question, Velshera said as she settled onto her own resting platform. Ember immediately climbed into her lap, still making happy sounds. Your species must have records about Draconids. You must know what others say about us. Why did you approach my daughter? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would stay with Velshera for the rest of her life. Where I come from, we have stories about creatures like you. We call them dragons. Most stories were about fighting them or fearing them. But my favorite stories were different. They were about the people brave enough to see past the teeth in fire, to see the person underneath. He smiled at Ember, who chirped at him. I figured those stories existed for a reason. Maybe because that's who we're supposed to be. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first met Ember on Station Zeta 9. Now he stood on the bridge of Captain Velshera's merchant vessel, watching the stars streak past as they traveled through contested space. He'd signed on as what Velshera called a cultural liaison, though Marcus thought himself more as a friend who was helping friends. The Draconid crew had accepted him quickly once they saw how Velshera and Ember trusted him. Tar, the security officer who'd been so suspicious at first, now regularly shared meals with Marcus and taught him basic Draconid phrases. Raxdor, the first officer, had even asked Marcus to explain human culture and history. It was during one of these conversations that Marcus learned the terrible truth. The Draconids weren't just feared. They were oppressed. They take the younglings sometimes, Raxdor had explained, his voice heavy with pain. The hierarchy enforcement fleet. They claim that Draconid children are too dangerous to be raised by their own people. They take them to rehabilitation centers, teach them to be less aggressive, less Draconid. Marcus had felt sick hearing this. It reminded him of the darkest chapters from Earth's history, the residential schools, the forced assimilation, the idea that one culture could decide another wasn't raising their children correctly. Now, as alarms suddenly blared through the ship, Marcus realized he might see this horror firsthand. 3 hierarchy ships approaching, announced the navigator. They're signaling us to stop and prepare for inspection. Velshera's expression darkened. We have all proper permits. Our cargo is legal. They have no legitimate reason to board us. But the hierarchy ships were already moving into position, blocking their path. These vessels belonged to the Zixstar, an insectoid species that held significant power in the Galactic Council. Their ships were sleek and efficient, bristling with weapons. The communication channel crackled to life. Draconid vessel, you're ordered to shut down engines and allow boarding. We have reports of unregistered juveniles aboard your ship. Marcus saw Velshera's claws dig into her command chair. Ember, who'd been playing near the navigation station, sensed attention and moved closer to her mother. All younglings aboard this ship are properly registered, Velshera replied, her voice controlled but strained. We are complying with all galactic regulations. That determination will be made by our inspectors. Refuse, and we will disable your vessel by force. There was no choice. Velshera ordered the engines shut down. Within minutes, a hierarchy boarding party was at their airlock. 6 Zixstar officers entered the ship. They were tall, thin creatures with multiple segmented limbs and compound eyes that reflected light in unsettling ways. Their leader, who identified himself as Inspector Calvex, carried a datapad and what looked like restraint devices. Were the juveniles? Calvex demanded. "My daughter is here," Velshera said, positioning herself protectively in front of Ember. "She is registered and traveling with her legal guardian." "Me?" Calvex's mandibles clicked in what the translator identified as dismissive amusement. "Draconid registration is under review. Galactic Council has concerns about juvenile draconids being raised in traditional environments. They become too aggressive, too dangerous. We are authorized to take custody of any juveniles in this sector for evaluation." Marcus felt anger flood through him. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. About one species deciding another didn't deserve to raise their own children. "You can't do this," Marcus said, stepping forward. The hierarchy officers turned their compound eyes toward him. "A human? Interesting. Stand aside, human. This does not concern your species." "It concerns me when I see something wrong happening right in front of me." Marcus moved to stand between the officers and Ember. The young draconid pressed against his legs, trembling with fear. "Move, or we will move you by force." "No." Tar and Raxdor moved to flank Marcus, their postures aggressive. But Marcus knew that if the draconids attacked hierarchy officers, it would only confirm every prejudice against them. It would make things worse. "On Earth," Marcus said loudly, making sure his words were being recorded by the ship systems, "we went through something like this. Powerful groups decided that other cultures weren't raising their children correctly. They took kids away from their families, tried to erase their culture, their language, their identity. We have a word for this now. We call it genocide." Inspector Calvex's antennae twitched. "You exaggerate. We are protecting these juveniles." "From what? From being loved by their families? From learning their own culture?" Marcus activated his personal communicator, setting it to broadcast on open channels. "I'm Marcus Chun, human merchant, currently aboard the Draconid vessel Star's Wing. I'm witnessing hierarchy officers attempting to seize a young Draconid from her mother without legal cause. They claim it's for safety, but I've spent 3 weeks with this crew. I've watched Captain Velshera care for her daughter. I've seen nothing but love and proper parenting. This isn't about safety. This is about discrimination." "Turn that off immediately," Calvex snapped. But it was too late. Marcus's broadcast was already spreading through local space. And humans, he knew, had a reputation for being unpredictable when they thought something was unfair. His comm unit started chiming with incoming messages. Other human vessels in the sector were responding. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth merchant ship Perseverance. We're 2 hours out and coming to your position. Independent hauler Yang here. I'm close enough to be there in 30 minutes. Hang tight, Marcus." More voices joined in. Human traders, human security contractors, even a human diplomatic courier. They were all changing course, converging on this location. Inspector Calvex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. His officers looked at each other uncertainly. "You are interfering with official hierarchy business," Calvex said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Marcus stood his ground, one hand resting gently on Ember's head. "No, I'm just making sure everyone knows what's happening here. Funny thing about humans, we really don't like bullies." The news spread through human space like wildfire. Within days, Marcus's broadcast in the contested zone had been viewed millions of times. The image of a young human standing between hierarchy officers and a frightened draconid child struck a chord that surprised even Marcus himself. He sat in the observation deck of Station Zeta 9, reading through messages on his datapad. Hundreds of humans were reaching out, asking questions about the draconids, wanting to know more, wanting to help. "You've created quite a disturbance," Velshera said as she entered the room. Ember bounded in behind her, no longer afraid to explore the station. In just a few weeks, everything had changed. Marcus smiled. "I just told the truth. People responded to it. And they had responded. The hierarchy had backed down that day, unwilling to create an incident with so many human vessels watching. But more importantly, something bigger had started. Human merchants began seeking out Draconid trading partners. Human diplomats requested meetings with Draconid representatives. The barrier of fear that had isolated Velshera's people for so long was finally cracking. The door chimed and Jessa's voice announced visitors. Captain Rodriguez and her crew are here, along with representatives from 3 other human vessels. Marcus stood as 5 humans entered, followed by 2 Draconids he'd never met before. Captain Rodriguez was a stern-looking woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and graying hair. The 2 Draconids were younger than Velshera, their scales a deep green color. Marcus-chun, Rodriguez said, extending her hand. You've got everyone talking. These are Captains Kresh and Vyra. They run freight operations in the Outer Rim. They heard what happened and wanted to meet the human who stood up to the hierarchy. Kresh, the larger of the 2 Draconids, performed the traditional greeting gesture. Marcus had learned enough now to return it properly, raising his arms and making a short vocalization. Kresh's eyes widened with pleased surprise. You honor our customs, Kresh said. This is rare. This is good. Over the next hour, they talked. Really talked. Kresh and Vyra shared stories that made Marcus's chest ache. Stories of Draconid traders being denied docking rights at major stations, of children who'd never met another species because their parents were too afraid to let them out, of talented engineers and scientists whose applications to galactic institutions were automatically rejected. We are not monsters, Vyra said quietly. We are simply not understood. Our roars are laughter. Our displays are greetings. But no one stays long enough to learn this. Then we teach them, Marcus said. Humans can be the bridge. We'll vouch for you, trade with you, show other species that Draconids are people, not predators. Captain Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about this. The Draconids have resources, technology, and trade goods that many colonies need. Humans have something the Draconids need even more. Acceptance. Connection. We can form a trading consortium. Joint human-Draconid operations. It benefits both our peoples. The idea took root quickly. Within a month, the first official human-Draconid trade agreements were signed. Within 2 months, joint crews were operating on 5 vessels. The cultural exchange was fascinating. Humans learned that Draconid music was based on rhythmic roaring patterns that could shake your bones. Draconids discovered that humans had actually imagined creatures like them in their ancient myths. And surprisingly, many of those myths portrayed dragons as wise and powerful rather than evil. Marcus found himself traveling between human and Draconid settlements, helping smooth over misunderstandings and teaching both sides about each other. Ember stayed with him often, becoming something of an ambassador herself. When other species saw a Draconid youngling playing happily with humans, laughing at jokes and sharing meals, it challenged every assumption they'd held. But it wasn't just about trade. Real friendships were forming. Tar started dating a human engineer named Sarah Park. Raxthor joined a mixed-species crew that included 3 humans and 2 Draconids. Children from both species learned each other's languages. One evening, as Marcus watched Ember teach a group of human children how to perform a traditional Draconid greeting dance, Velshera sat beside him. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked softly. "I just made some friends," Marcus replied. "No, you've given my people hope. For 3 generations, we have been isolated, feared. We began to believe that we were meant to be alone in the universe, that perhaps the other species were right about us." Her golden eyes reflected the station lights. "But you saw us, really saw us, and because you did, others are starting to look as well." A new message appeared on Marcus's datapad. It was from a species called the Urshai, massive bear-like creatures who've been classified as too aggressive for most diplomatic channels. The message was simple. "We heard what happened with the Draconids. Can humans help us too?" Marcus showed the message to Velshera. She read it, and then looked at the children playing together, her daughter laughing among them. "The galaxy called us monsters," she said, "but you called us friends. And now others who were cast aside are watching, hoping." Marcus thought about those older stories, about dragons and the people brave enough to approach them, about how one moment of courage could change everything. Then we helped them too, he said. All of them. Every species of galaxy decided was too different, too dangerous, too other. We show them what we've learned. That differences aren't threats. They're opportunities. Velshera's expression shifted into what Marcus now recognized as a draconic smile. Then we have much work to do, my friend. The Galactic Council Chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate hundreds of species. Today, every seat was filled. Representatives from across known space had gathered for an emergency summit, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus stood in the center of the speaking platform, feeling very small. Beside him stood Captain Velshera, her massive form somehow reassuring rather than intimidating. In the front row of the observation gallery, Ember sat with a group of younglings from various species, all of them mixed together in a way that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. The Council Arbiter, a floating crystalline entity named Luxera, spoke in tones that resonated through everyone's translation implants. This summit has been called to address the unauthorized alliance forming between humans and draconids, as well as other species classified as potentially hazardous. The Council has concerns about stability and safety. A hierarchy representative stood, his insectoid body rigid with disapproval. The humans have interfered with established protocols. The draconids are a warrior species with documented aggressive tendencies. Allowing them unrestricted contact with other civilizations is dangerous. Marcus took a deep breath. He'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, but his heart still pounded. Then he felt Velshera's claw rest gently on his shoulder, and he remembered why he was here. "May I speak?" Marcus asked. Luxera's crystalline form shimmered in agreement. 6 months ago, I met a draconid for the first time. Everyone told me to stay away. They said draconids were dangerous, aggressive, unpredictable. They warned me that approaching one would get me killed. Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. But when I actually met them, I didn't find monsters. I found people, parents who love their children, traders trying to make an honest living, individuals who've been isolated and feared for so long that they'd started to believe maybe they deserved it. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded. Others looked uncomfortable. You see claws and teeth and fire, and you decide that's all they are. But did anyone here actually try to understand them? Did anyone learn that their roars are laughter? That their displays are polite greetings? That their culture values honor and family, just like so many of ours do? Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. Or did you just decide they were too different and lock them away? The hierarchy representatives' mandibles clicked angrily. They are predators, apex hunters. Their very nature makes them a threat. So are humans, Marcus replied. We're persistence hunters. We evolved chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We have weapons that can destroy planets. We fought wars that killed millions of our own kind. By your logic, humans should be isolated too, locked away for everyone's safety. That is different, another council member protested. How? Because we look less scary? Because we're smaller? Marcus shook his head. That's not justice. That's prejudice dressed up in safety protocols. Velshera stepped forward, her voice resonating through the chamber. For 3 generations, my people have been treated as animals wearing the appearance of civilization. Our children have been taken from us. Our traders have been barred from stations. Our scholars have been denied opportunities to contribute to galactic knowledge, all because we look frightening to you. She gestured to the observation gallery, where Ember sat peacefully with the other younglings. Look at our children playing together. Human, Draconid, Centaurian, Vexillian. They do not see threats. They see friends. Children understand what many adults have forgotten, that beneath our different appearances, we are all people. An older representative from a species Marcus didn't recognize stood slowly. I must confess something. My people, the Urshai, were also classified as too aggressive 30 years ago. We have been confined to our home system. Since then, watching humans and draconids form friendships has given us hope. Hope that perhaps the galaxy might see us differently too. Another voice joined in, this one from a serpentine species called the Seth. We too have faced such restrictions. Our appearance frightens many. Our venom is dangerous, but we are artists, philosophers, engineers. We are more than our fangs. One by one, representatives from nearly a dozen species stood. Each shared similar stories of isolation, fear, and misunderstanding. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he realized just how many peoples had been pushed aside simply for being different. The council chamber erupted in discussions. Arguments flew back and forth. Some representatives insisted the old ways were safer. Others demanded change. Finally, Luxera's resonant voice cut through the noise. Clearly, our current approaches cause harm. Perhaps we need new protocols. Willing intermediary species who can help bridge cultural gaps. Species who are not afraid to approach those we have deemed unapproachable. Marcus exchanged glances with Velshera. This was what they'd hoped for. Humans volunteer. Marcus said firmly, we'll work with any species willing to try. We'll help them integrate. Help others understand them, not through force or demands, but through friendship and patience. The vote wasn't unanimous. Some council members remained opposed, but majority agreed to a trial program. Species that had been isolated would be given chances to prove themselves through cultural exchange partnerships. As the summit ended, Marcus stood on an observation deck, watching ships depart in every direction. Ember approached, now almost adolescent-sized, with 3 younglings from other formerly isolated species trailing behind her. Marcus, Ember said in careful standard, a language she'd been learning. The Urshy youngling asks if you will visit her people next, to help them like you helped us. Marcus knelt down to be at eye level with the small bear-like creature who peeked shyly from behind Ember. I'd be honored. Tell her we'll teach everyone what we've learned, that the scariest-looking people often have the biggest hearts. Velshera joined them, looking out at the stars. In our oldest legends, we have a saying, fire recognizes fire. It means that the fierce can recognize the fierce, that strength knows strength. But I think it means something else too. Those who have been burned by loneliness recognize others suffering the same flame. And sometimes it takes someone brave enough to sit beside the fire to bring warmth instead of fear. 6 months ago, Marcus had been a simple cargo runner, making his first solo delivery. Now he was part of something bigger. A movement that was slowly reshaping how the galaxy saw itself. He looked at the group of younglings, all different species, all playing together without fear, and he smiled. You know, he said to Velshera, back on Earth we had a saying too, be the change you want to see in the world. I guess it works for the galaxy as well. Ember chirped happily, and the other younglings joined in, each making their species sound a joy. It created a strange but beautiful harmony that echoed through the observation deck. The galaxy was changing, one friendship at a time.